Hey y'all, if you are a married believer trying to navigate this intimacy thing without shame, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because you are in the right place.
What we learned in church was not necessarily wrong, but in many ways it was incomplete. Intimacy in its simplest form is just intentional connection. Solitude and isolation can seem the same. So, solitude is when we are intentionally pulling away from people, but we are actively healing. Isolation is when we start to push people away and hide, as both people are willing to do the work, you keep fighting.
Welcome to the space where we tell our truth. Testimony, healing, breaking shame loose. Learning our bodies and walking by faith. Intimacy, God's way, right here is the place. Sex-Ed for Saints, Mondays at 6. We believe in the power of the story. Not just pain, but redemption and glory. Faith in the rhythm, hearts in the mix. Trust in educators. Mondays at 6, we're overcoming by the word of these testimonies. People getting free when we speak what's holy. Healing in our hearts, shame starts to split. Every story told, another chain gets stripped. Learning our bodies, learning His way. Intimacy and faith, walking day by day. This is where we heal, where the truth sticks. Sex-Ed for Saints, Mondays at 6.
I'm so excited to finally share this book with you. Hey God, Can I is available now. Find the link in my bio to get your copy.
Hey friends, quick pause in this lesson because I need to put you onto something that has been blessing so many households. This episode has been sponsored by Covenant Eyes, the accountability app that helps you protect your eyes, your mind, and your marriage. If you're serious about keeping your digital life pure, guarded, and God honoring, Covenant Eyes is a game changer. It helps you to stay accountable online and creates a safe space for your heart and your home. And listen, because you are a part of the Marriage Lab, you get 30 days free when you use my code Marriage Lab. So go ahead, take that step, cover your devices, and cover your covenant.
I'm so glad to be here for another episode of the Sex Ed for Saints podcast, and I'm excited about my guest, Coach April. Hi, April. How you doing?
Hey, Coach Tammy, I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I'm excited for today's episode because we're going to be talking about intimacy during hard seasons. I know a lot of people go through hard times within their relationships, and Coach April is an expert, and she's going to share some tips and all the things, all the insight to help you be able to function through it. But before we get into that, I like to pull questions from the audience. So if you ever have a question that you want to ask and you want us to answer it on the podcast, on my Instagram, the Marriage Lab LLC, there is a link in my bio that you can click on, and I have a spot where you can ask anonymous questions. And so just head on over there and we will answer them on the pod. And so for today's question, I'm going to read it. I feel emotionally drained and disconnected. I just have a lot going on right now, and my husband still expects me to show up, but I'm exhausted. What should I do? What should I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually a common question, particularly with women. And I don't know if this person has children, how long they've been married, but typically with women, when we start to wear all those hats, we can get emotionally drained. And I think a couple things that is helpful is one, to be honest about where you're at. So that means really showing up with your spouse and saying, "Look, I don't have the answer to this. These are the things that are going on." A lot of times what we'll do is we'll just say like, "I'm tired, I don't feel like it, I don't," all these things. But I think it helps when we can be vulnerable enough to say, "Look, this is what I'm feeling in this emotional state." And then asking yourself, what can you give? Now you might not be able to give like 100% right now, but can I give a consistent 10%? Right. And what does that 10% look like? So that may be saying, "Honey, look, I can't give an hour every night, but how about this? Tuesday nights, you and me, right? For 2 hours. What is it that you can honestly give? And then ask for help, and not necessarily from your spouse, because he may not be able to answer the question. He may not be able to help you, but can you get some outside support that is going to help you to navigate your emotions, navigate the season that you're in? That could be therapy, that could be counseling, that could be your spiritual advisor, but not keeping it bottled in, because then it tends to just explode. So, without me knowing the couple, I'm hopeful that that answered your question.
You sure did. You answered a lot of points. I really don't even have anything to really add to that. I really don't. That was so good. The only thing that I would say is I know we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we're going through various things. And so just give yourself some grace as you are navigating this. Like, not don't try to be so hard on yourself all the time, right? Just give yourself some grace as you try to navigate and do everything that April said.
Right.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And with that, April, I just want you to introduce yourself to everyone and let them know a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so I'm so glad to be here. So I am a certified relationship coach, and what that means is that I help people to have better relationships. So whether you are single and you are navigating heartbreak, whether you are in the dating phase and you're trying to figure out how to date in a healthy way, or if you're a couple and you're trying to navigate intimacy and communication and those type of things. I've been in this work for about 6 years. I've been coaching for over 12 years. And I started this journey after my third divorce. So in 2019, I woke up at 41 years old, facing my third divorce, didn't know what to do, went on a healing journey. And then by 2021, just kind of made it my mission to help people to not repeat my mistakes, and to help people to have better relationships.
Yeah, I love that because what you're really saying is I've been through the hard times. I know exactly how to help you through it because I have experienced it first.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. And so with that, I kind of want to get into it because, when people say difficult season, I'm going through something difficult, what exactly are we talking about? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, that can mean something different to every couple, right? So, one thing that I'm a proponent of is that there is no relationship that looks exactly like another relationship. Even if we, mirror our relationships off of our parents or other relationships we see, it's not going to be the same. So, a hard time for one couple could simply be, we're not communicating as well. A hard time for another couple could be, we haven't been close in months and we're on the verge of divorce, right? It's varying. But really, what I look at is, when does your relationship feel like it's strained, right? So that could be something as simple as, like I said, we're arguing a little bit more. We're like two ships in the night. We're just kind of, passing each other. But it's varying. So what does it look like to you? It's almost like when that check engine light for your relationship comes on, right? When you're starting to feel a little uneasy, you're starting to feel a little off. That's when, it's time to kind of look at things.
Yeah, yeah. And I can definitely identify with that because I remember there was a season in my marriage where my husband, he was working and his job, the position that he had at that particular time, I had just had two kids back to back, right? So they were like newborn and like one. And they put him on the overnight shift. And
Ah.
so when he would go to work at night, and then when he came home in the mornings, he's obviously tired. And so
Mhm.
I was like, wait, I need some help with these kids.
Mhm.
So that was a difficult season for me. Just being able to navigate through that, it was very, very challenging because I was going through postpartum during that time and like having to bounce these kids on. It
Mhm.
was a lot. It was a lot. And so my question is, for me, the first thing that went was intimacy, right? Like sex in the
Mhm.
bedroom, all of that. Like I did not want it at all. And so why do you think it goes there first?
Yeah. I want to take a step back and just kind of talk a little bit about like what intimacy is, right?
Mhm.
So you mentioned sex in the bedroom. And that is something that I think that most people, when we say the word intimacy, that's immediately where their mind goes to, right? But knowing that intimacy has different levels, there's emotional intimacy, there's mental, there could be financial intimacy, right? There's so many different levels to it. But I think that the intimacy part is the one that goes first, is because honestly, it's the easier one to let go of.
Mhm.
Meaning, when you're a mom, you can't stop being a mom, right? Your kids got to be fed, they got to get up. You got to go to work. So that doesn't go first, right? What goes first is it's easier to say, well, I'm just going to go to bed and not touch. Or I'm just going to, go shopping, or I'm just going to fill that void with something else. But I think it's easier to be distant when the person is with the person that we're close to, when all the other things start to pile on. I hope that made sense.
It made a lot of sense, because we often get lost in the cycle of, I have this going on, I have that going on, and it takes more work to put in the work to focus on the area of intimacy and sex and all the things. Like it takes a lot of work to do that.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
yes, it made a lot of sense. Where do you think the misconception comes from?
Ooh. um it really comes from our upbringing, our environment. So it can be cultural, right? It can be what we saw in our families. It can be what we saw on TV. It can be the media. That's a huge one, right? It could be what we learned in church. I'm a Christian, grew up a Christian. And I'll tell you that I feel like what we learned in church was not necessarily wrong, but in many ways it was incomplete, especially when we talk about intimacy and things like sex in our marriage. And it comes from a myriad of things, right? It's what we see, the examples that we're given, what we learn, whether it's through friends or family, about what intimacy really is.
Yeah, and I love that. I love what you said, where the church gives information that is not necessarily wrong but incomplete. I love how you phrase that. So how does faith fit into that perception?
Yeah. I think we grow up hearing a lot about this term intimacy with God, right?
Mhm.
And that may be your prayer time, that may be your worship time. And then when we talk about intimacy with others, it really kind of goes to this physical expression, right? And so I think that intimacy in its simplest form is just intentional connection. If
Mhm.
we think about that, right? And that connection might be words that we speak, right? We pray to God, we can speak to our partner. That may be a simple touch, that may be an act of service or an act of kindness, that might be affirmations. And then it also might be physical touch, right? Touching your spouse during the day, maybe sending them text. But it really is intentional um, connection with that person. And so if you reframe it like that, then intimacy gets removed from only being in the bedroom.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that because one of the things that I recognize in individuals is that they lack some intimacy because they don't have that relationship with God. And so they don't even know how to communicate that. And so for people who are like that, who are like, hey, I want to be a little bit more connected, but I don't really understand where to start. Like, where do they even start to understand the language for that?
Yeah, I think that it's getting to know your partner.
Hmm.
And I know people listening are like, well, I know my spouse, but it's really being vulnerable with each other, right? Not just what do I like, but what scares me, what intimidates me. Really being in a safe space. And let me say this, that I believe happens when you feel safe with your partner. And when I say feel safe, I don't mean just a physical safety, but an emotional safety, right? As a man, can I cry in front of this woman? Can I be vulnerable? As a woman, can I express my needs and there not be an argument? But making sure that it is a safe space, but really getting to know your spouse, asking those tough questions. What are you afraid of? Right? Tell me about your childhood. These are things that I think sometimes in the dating phase we skip over because of the chemistry. but it's really about getting to know your spouse in a very deep way.
I love that. I love that because, you know, people are so afraid to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
but that's where intimacy begins.
Yeah, and when you
Yeah.
when you talk about intimacy with God, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not comparing your spouse to God, let me say that. But when we go to God and we can cry, some of us have never cried with God, right? We've never been vulnerable with God. But think about that when we go to him as our father, as our friend, right? As our partners, all the things that God is, we can fall apart. And I feel like your partner should be that safe space to fall apart.
Yeah, I love that. There was a post on one of my social media platforms that went viral, and it was just a conversation with a guy. He was talking to his friends, and they were having a conversation around the fact that his wife calls him all the time, and he picks up, and his friend was like, "You always pick up the phone when she call. Like she just call you a lot. Like it was basically she calls you a lot." And he was telling them like, y'all need to change your perspective, right? Because she might be going through something, and I need to make sure that I'm pretty much there for her. And I think that post blew up because so many women just wanted their person to just be available emotionally so that they could be able to say all the things that they want to say all the things that or do all the things that they want to do. And so when it comes to intimacy, many women are rejected, or even men, right? So how do they navigate a safe space when they're being rejected by their spouse?
Yeah. I didn't see that post, but I do follow I would call, relationship influencers and things like that. And I'll tell you that across the board, there is this kind of divide about what masculinity looks like in a relationship, right? So it is the guy who picks up the phone all the time. Oh man, you're not really a man. And then I saw a post once where there was a guy who said something like, if you're a man, like real men don't pay attention to bills. That's like your wife's. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, what is happening? So I think one, we have to be careful about what we're listening to and what we're allowing in our hearts when it comes to relationships. And if you are that woman that is, frustrated, I do think that one, being honest with your spouse, two, inviting your spouse into getting help, because one of the things that I think we forget about is our relationship expectations are shaped about by our experiences and by our examples, right? So if you have the man who grew up in the home saying, men don't cry, men don't answer the phone, men do this, and then you've got the woman who are in this space of, well, women do this and women do this and women do this, you've got this disconnect. And so it may take you guys just getting some support to meet each other halfway and to understand why that thinking is that way and what's best for your home.
I love that. It was so funny because just this morning, to trigger us, my one of my mentors for one of the groups that I'm in, he was like, when my son cries, he's 3. He's like, when my son cries, I tell him don't cry because men don't cry. He was just trying to trigger a response from us,
Yeah.
and we all went in like, no, he's gonna grow up to be emotionally unavailable. Like, don't do that.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
that's exactly what happened. So let's speak to that a little bit, because we are women, not we. A lot of women are with men who are emotionally unavailable. What are some things that they can do to? Because obviously they can't, like they're not their teacher, right? But what are some things that they can do to, help them to recognize where they are lacking in that area?
Yeah. I think one is supporting where they are emotionally. And what I mean by that is giving them a safe space to express why they feel that way without judgment. Now, let me say this, this doesn't mean that what they're saying is right, but when your husband says, well, I'm like this because my father was this way, versus the response of, well, you need to, all right, well, let's talk about that. How did that make you feel as a child? And how does that make you feel in this relationship?
Mhm.
So many times. So I was on a panel couple weeks ago for Black Bride magazine, and I was interviewing couples. Some have been married for like over 40 years, some have been married for like 10 months. And I asked the men a very important question. I said, what made you feel like your wife was the one? And the answer across the board was the emotional safety they felt with this woman. And I feel like if we give our spouse the opportunity to express their emotions without the judgment, without the men don't cry, without the you shouldn't feel that way, it opens up a dialogue and a trust with them to be able to continue doing that work.
I love that. I love that because you're just getting the conversation starting, which
Mhm,
triggers, okay, maybe I do need to be a little bit more self-aware, and the
mhm,
guards come down because of the way that you are, having that conversation. So I love that
mhm.
answer. I love that.
Yeah, and there's some tools, without getting too deep. There's some tools that I use with couples, just to help them communicate better with emotions. And so it's stuff like, not blaming your spouse. Well, you always, or but expressing things like, this is how it makes me feel. And so that's another thing. I don't think that we were taught how to communicate in relationships, right? If you
Mhm.
think about growing up, I know for me, for a lot of people that I work with, we were never taught how to communicate. And so you might need to get some tools just to learn how to communicate your emotions a little bit differently than you've done in the past.
Yes, absolutely, 1000%. Yeah, because people don't have that language. They don't have that language, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. And so I want to go back a little bit because a lot of people are going through hard things, and it's not necessarily the relationship, but it's because they have experienced things that makes it difficult for them to, you know, um, be available. So how do individuals deal with situations like that when they have like past traumas and things like that?
Mhm. Yeah, I've experienced past traumas. I work with, people who have experienced traumatic things, whether it's in their childhood, young adult life, and it affects their relationship. The first thing that I would say is to work on yourself. Unfortunately, not everything is going to be solved with your spouse. There may be some inner work that needs to be done. There may be some self discovery, some self healing that needs to be done. And so, one of the things that I would encourage anyone in that situation to do is to do some inner work and understand how that past is affecting your future. When people ask me, how did I go through 3 divorces? And I was a Christian and I was on staff through 2 of them. I had all the things. There were some things in my past related to abuse and rejection that I had never dealt with until I was in my 40s. And so it was causing me to make certain decisions in my relationships. And so I always encourage people to start with doing the inner work, and you'll be amazed at how that work will start to overflow into your relationship.
Yeah, I love that because that sounds a lot like my process, right? In terms of like experiencing trauma and then going into a marriage, it's almost like a light bulb just gets shown
Yeah.
on you when in that marriage, and then all the things that's wrong with you, God begins to highlight, and you're like, wait a minute, you know? So that inner work for you, what exactly did that look like for somebody who's like, okay, I want to work on my inner self, but I don't even know what that means. Like, where do I even start?
Mhm. It started with being honest. My first honest conversation with God was telling him that I was mad at him and I didn't want him to talk to me because these divorces were his fault and he could have stopped it. I mean, all the emotions, y'all. But it started with being honest with myself about where I was at. And then I got help. So during my initial healing journey, I had a therapist, I had a life coach, I ate a lot of ice cream, I worked with my physician, right? So I had this team of people that helped me heal, right? So my physician was like, hey, this stress, this anxiety it's affecting your blood pressure. It's expecting, it's affecting all these things. My therapist, my life coach, but it really started with me having to raise my hand and say something is not right, and I need to figure out what that is. And that's not putting blame. That's not, it was taking accountability for where I was in life so that I could actually heal for real.
Yeah, I love that because you're you're inviting God into the situation, but you're also saying, "Hey, I need community. I
Yeah.
need a team of community." And I think so many people are out here trying to do it by themselves because they don't feel like they need anybody, or they're not vulnerable enough to get the help that they need. So, what kind of language could somebody for who is experiencing something like that, right? What kind of language could they use for themselves to be able to say, I need help in this situation? Like, how
Mhm.
can they develop that?
Use the language you know. If you know I'm struggling, I'm struggling. My language was I'm drowning because that's what I felt like. Use the language you know. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be biblically correct, right? It doesn't have to be all these things. Use the language you know to say, I need help. And it could simply be, I'm not okay. I have a saying that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not ask for help, right? Um, don't stop asking for help. And what
Mhm,
I mean by that is sometimes we ask for help from the wrong person.
mhm,
And your pastor is not your therapist, your mom is not your therapist. And so your mom may be able to help you in some areas, your pastor in others, your therapist in others. But if you find even therapy and you're like, I'm not vibing with this therapist, go find another. But we have to chase our healing, right? So use the language you have. I'm drowning. I'm not okay. I need help. I'm struggling. Life sucks. Whatever that language is, use
mhm.
it to get the help that you need.
Yeah, I love that because what you did was you put action on healing. It's not an isolation type of event. How would you speak to the person who is isolated within their circumstance?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this. Solitude and isolation can seem the same. So, solitude is when we are intentionally pulling away from people, but we are actively healing, right? So, as we are healing or we're going through something, there may be environments you don't need to be in, people you don't need to be around. If your marriage is struggling, don't hang around a bunch of people with bad marriages, right? There's some solitude there. Isolation is when we start to push people away and hide. And that is when it's dangerous. Being alone with our thoughts, feelings, emotions never ends well. Jesus took naps, y'all, but then he came back to the community. And so, for the person who feels like I'm isolating, just reach out to one person. You don't have to tell your whole business, you don't have to tell the whole story, but just reach out to one person. And I'm saying this from experience, y'all. I know what it's like to cry on the floor, to melt, to feel like I'm falling apart, no one will understand, and literally reaching out to one person, just saying, I need help, right? So, once again, solitude, that's good. That's your vacation. That's your self care. That's stealing away for an afternoon nap. But isolation is dangerous. That is where Satan comes in and he can fill our mind with thoughts and emotions that we don't need to have.
Yeah, so important, so important. I remember I used to call my friend, you don't understand what I'm going through when I was in my difficult season. And she's like, what do you mean? Like, I have like five children. I absolutely know what you're going through, but the enemy will make you feel like no one understands is my point when you isolate yourself. And so
Yeah.
it's important to, communicate because that's what's going to help you get through. What usually causes a couple to finally address the disconnect?
Yeah. Funny enough, it's normally not both partners. It's usually one partner that has had enough.
Hmm.
And that's when they start to address it. But I think the key to avoiding that space is exactly what we're talking about, right? Is practicing those different levels of intimacy as life has the ebbs and the flows, right? But typically what happens is there's one spouse who says, "I've had enough and we've got to do something about it." The unfortunate part is that too many relationships get to that place.
Mhm.
Instead of doing those kind of periodic check-ins with each other, whether it's weekly or hey, how are you doing? How am I doing? Right? Let's be honest with each other. And so what happens is you get one spouse who's just fed up, I can't take anymore, and that's usually when couples start to address their issues.
Yeah, and at that point they're already burnt out, right?
Mhm.
From
Mhm.
whatever they
Mhm.
are experiencing. So what does healthy God honoring intimacy look like during those hard seasons?
Yeah. Once again, I don't think that there's kind of a textbook, it should look like this, but I do have this kind of acronym for what a safe relationship looks like. And the S stands for it is secure. Do I feel emotionally secure, physically secure, financially? Like, do I feel safe, secure with this person? The A is affirming, right? Is this uplifting me? Or is my relationship just constantly dragging me down, kind of under the water? F is for fruitful. Is our relationship producing fruit? So, is it producing fruit in us, in our children, in our community? What is our relationship producing? And then the E is just for empowering, right? Is this relationship keeping us strong, physically strong, spiritually strong? Like, what does that look like? And so, kind of just walking through that in your relationship. Once again, going back to it can trigger that check engine light, right? Wait a minute, I haven't felt safe in a while in this relationship is only producing bad feelings. It's only producing hardship. That's when we need to take a step back and look at what's missing in our relationship. And let me say this, um, you should expect your relationship to have the highs and the lows. I
Mhm.
think sometimes we think that if we're having a disconnect, then our relationship is over, or that's not the case, right? That is a relationship. It's learning how to ride the roller coaster, it's learning how to navigate those ebbs and flows in your relationship so that when we have a dark place, the first response isn't this is over, right? But it's
Mhm.
like, okay, we're in a dark place. Let's navigate this. Let's get through it together.
I love that. I love that you say that because, every relationship does go through highs and lows. And I know this is going to be like it's not going to be like a blanket answer, but I want people to be able to hear it, right? Change happens slow sometimes. How long should difficult seasons last?
Woo, that is a loaded question. No, you're spot on with the answer that there is no one size fits all, right? Because something in my marriage that could be detrimental is something in another person's marriage that's like, oh, we're over that in an hour, right? But I do believe that as long as both people are willing to do the work, you keep fighting.
Mhm.
Um, as a person who's been divorced 3 times, I am not an advocate for divorce.
Mhm.
I am team marriage. Now, I do believe that divorce can be an answered prayer in some situations, but I am not a divorce advocate. Okay. So I do believe that fighting for your marriage is worth it when both people want it. So
Mhm.
you look at something like financial issues, right? Getting some help, getting back on track, that can be a few months. When you look at things like infidelity, that could be years, right?
Mhm.
So there really isn't this timetable. But the key for me when I work with couples is, are you both actively working to solve this problem?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I love that because there's no time frame depending on the circumstance, and a lot of times it's what do you have the capacity to be able to handle as you navigate based on, the current events that you're having. And so, let's go there in terms of like the building and the coming back together. um, what does that look like for somebody who is working and actively working on it? Like, what are they doing to show that they are working on it?
Yeah, I like to think of rebuilding a relationship like putting a puzzle together, right?
Mhm.
You've got this relationship that may have at one time been this pretty picture, and now, for lack of better words, it's shattered into these pieces, right? And so I think that one of the misconceptions is that we're going to either quickly put the picture back together, or the picture's going to look exactly like it was before, right? And in many cases, when our relationship has a hard time, when we encounter some issues, we almost expect that it's going to be exactly like it was before. But unfortunately, both parties have now been affected, so it may not. And so it's really doing the hard work consistently to put the pieces back together, right? So, like you said, it's like a slow burn. It
Mhm.
is something that might take time, and being patient with each other, to navigate what that looks like is very important. Being open and honest about where you are in the rebuilding phase. If this person has violated your trust in any way, trust is something that is earned, right?
Yeah.
Forgiveness is one thing, trust is another. I heard it said like this, that when you forgive somebody, you forgive them immediately. But
Mhm.
the journey to trusting them can be very long, right? That can sometimes take years, a lifetime. And
Mhm.
so, really giving each other grace to walk the journey at a pace that is healthy for each person.
I love that because forgiveness was one of the questions that I forgot about,
Uh-huh.
and then you mentioned it right there, because that's important. Forgiveness. So thank you for answering that before I even had a chance to ask. But I wanted to know, what are some things that couples can do to be intentional about shifting the atmosphere together, as they work on those goals?
Mhm. Spending time together.
Mhm.
That, I tell you, I don't think that I have met any couple that is what I would consider in a healthy relationship that does not spend regular time together. And what I mean by that, that's not just the 5 minutes before we go to bed, but that is being intentional about whether it's regular dates, whether it is just regular check-ins. I know couples at the beginning of the year, they kind of do a survey of each other, like, hey, rate me on, how was I being a wife last year? How did I do being a husband last year? But it is spending time together. And when I say spending time together, I'm not talking about always sitting on the couch on your phones, right? That's great. That's nice. You're close, close to each other, but it is being intentional about saying we are going to block out the world and just spend time with each other. But that, I tell you, that's the number one thing, is that couples who spend quality time together.
Yes, and for couples who have children, I want you to stress the importance of, family time is not the same thing as mommy and daddy time.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Yes. Mommy and daddies need to be alone. And I'll tell you, that might be a struggle, right? Someone listening is like, look, we don't have babysitters, we don't have mommy and daddy time needs to happen. I know a couple who had very small children. They did not have a lot of family, they didn't trust a lot of people with their kids, but they found this church that would have almost date nights, right? So you'd go to like a 30-minute thing, and then they would watch your children, and it was like a Friday night, for like 2 hours so that you can have a date, right? But get creative about spending that time together. I have another couple who have 5 kids, and what they do is they use their vacation days to stay home while the kids are at school, right? So you just got to get creative with how you spend time with each other. It may not always look the same in every season, but do what you need to do so that you guys get that time together.
I love that because that means that you are being super intentional
Mhm.
about getting that time in, which is so important. It is so important. It's vital. for your relationship. So, what should couples not do to try to fix their intimacy quickly?
One of the first things you should not do is try to force the other person to match where you're at. And I'm going to specifically talk about physical intimacy, right? Majority of couples, their physical intimacy, their physical needs do not match, despite what the world tells you. It's just who we are as humans. You typically have a microwave that's married to a crock pot. Right? And so, one of the things that you can do is to understand what intimacy means to your spouse, right? If your spouse's love language is physical touch, they may get turned on with just a touch of a hand, right? If your spouse's love language is, gifts, right? The simplest gifts may turn them on. But understanding what excites your spouse, and it may not be the same thing that excites you, and then meet each other in the middle. This may mean trying some things that you don't necessarily like. And what I mean by trying some things, it could be like just doing a hobby with them, right? It could be showing up in a different way emotionally, right? It's putting ourselves in the position to support our spouse where they need it.
Listen, it works. It
Mhm.
works. It absolutely works. Meeting in the middle, because not all the time you're going to be on the same page, just like you said, because that's speaking to desire. Yes.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. There are the spontaneous and the responsive and all of that. And so, understanding, where you're at will help you be able to navigate that as well. So, help somebody understand what they can do to continue learning each other.
So I have a few different resources. The Gottman Institute has some really great resources. They've got these little cards you can use. But just go back to your dating time, right? How did you get to know that person? You asked them questions. You guys may have done things together and you liked it or you didn't. And I mean, like, you tried mini golf and it's like, all right, this sucks or this was fun. But if you are lacking in the area of being creative with getting to know your spouse, like I said, there's a lot of tools. There's like these date night tools, there's the 20 question tools that may actually be fun of asking your spouse questions that you may not have ever asked them. And then, like I said, just be willing to try things you've never tried before. Ask your spouse, what's that crazy thing that you've always wanted to try? Let's go do it, right?
Mhm.
I love kayaking. So I would love to have someone who likes kayaking. Um, but it's really just it's being intentional
Mhm.
about getting to know your partner.
Even with that, what is one thing that um, every couple who's struggling should remember when it comes to, um, the hard seasons?
Yeah. Remember that you are a team,
Mm,
right? Many times in hard seasons, or well, I would say many times based upon my experience, many times in hard seasons, couples tend to turn against each other
mm,
instead of turning towards each other, right? You should have the it's us against the world mentality, not it's me against my spouse mentality. So remember that you are a team and that you're stronger together than apart.
yeah, I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. And I want people to, who are experiencing difficult times
Mhm.
right now, and they feel like they don't have anybody. They've listened to this, episode. What is something that they could use right now to kind of like help them?
Yeah. I'll give 3 things,
Okay, yeah.
that I kinda live by. The first one is be honest with each other.
Hmm.
Be honest about where you're at, be honest about what you're feeling, right? Have a heart-to-heart conversation, not through text, not in the heat of the moment while we're angry, but sit down and really share with each other, "This is how I'm feeling right now." What I have found in many relationships when we get to that place of, talking about divorce or splitting up is that you'll typically have one or both spouses that say, I never knew they felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, one, be honest with each other. Two, if you don't have the tools, go get the tools. And that might cost you money, it might cost you time, but whether that's a therapist, a coach like myself, a counselor, whatever that looks like, going to conferences, but invest in your healing, go get the help. I said this before that most of us were not taught how to do healthy relationships. We were not given the skills to communicate in our younger years. So you may need to learn them now. And then lastly, commit to doing the hard work, right? So commit to saying that, look, we may have some dark days, but we're not giving up on each other. That is my commitment to you. I'm not giving up on this marriage. That is my commitment to you. And that is my commitment to myself. And so be honest about where you are, get the help that you need, and then commit to doing the work.
I absolutely love all of that. I love that because we have to be intentional and we
Yeah.
have to put in the work if you want your relationship to work. That's the only way that it can happen is if you do the actual work. And I
Yeah.
think so many times people run away from it,
Mhm.
but I think it's so important to lean into it. And so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. Here's the thing, healing hurts.
Mm,
If you've ever gone through healing after a surgery, an injury, healing of your heart, healing hurts sometimes, but it's so worth it. And so, yeah, doing the work, it might be challenging, it might be uncomfortable. There may be some dark days, but it'll be worth it.
yeah, yeah. It's that pain, boy.
Mhm.
It's that pain, but like you said, it's absolutely necessary. I love that. We could be talking on this subject all day.
Yes.
But we kind of have to wrap up. So, to those who are listening, what do you want to tell the audience right now about, maintaining um, or building up while they are experiencing these difficult times?
Yeah, and I think you said this early on, and it's words that I live by. Give
Mhm.
yourself grace and give
Mhm.
your spouse grace.
Yeah.
Right? Most of us weren't taught how to do this. Most of us are learning later in life as we are adults. But give each other some grace in this time as you're rebuilding, as you're investing in your relationship. But give each other some grace.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. April, I think that everything that you said today was so valuable. You're definitely going to be able to help some people with the information that you are sharing. And I want them to be able to contact you. So, how do people find you?
Yeah, you can connect with me just using my name. So April Nowlin on social media platforms, on YouTube, as well as my website.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Do you have any products or anything that you offer people?
Yes. So I have a podcast, When Love Comes, and it really is for people who are navigating dating and relationships. And we just kind of talk about going through some of those hard times. What does healing after heartbreak look like? What does it look like to date or have a marriage after you've been hurt? So we talk about all things relationships. And then I do have a program called the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. That's a program that I just started doing last year, but it's an amazing program developed by the Gottman Institute. But it really gives couples just the steps to heal, to navigate relationships. It gives them those tools that we just didn't have growing up.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And to the audience, I do appreciate you tuning in for this episode. April, she shared a wealth of knowledge and tools that you can use right now to begin the journey because intimacy right now might be difficult, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Once you build yourself, have community, and do everything that she said, replay this video because you might have to watch it twice. You will be able to experience the hard times. Remember, you will not stay there. It is only a season, and seasons never stay the same. And so I want to thank you all for tuning in to this episode. Do you have any last words that you want to share to the audience? Any questions that I did not ask that you want to answer?
No, I think the last thing that I would say is just remember that you were made for love. And even though our relationships have these ebbs and these flows in them, just know that you were made for love. And I believe that you can create the love that you deserve.
I love that. I love that. Once again, thank you all for tuning into the Sex Ed for Saints podcast.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Now, friends, if this conversation blessed you, do me a favor. Take a moment to like, leave a review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast because you already know we need more faith filled, real conversations like this in the world. And listen, I know you heard a gem today, something that made you pause, something that made you think, something that made you say, woo, this was for me, but friend, it might not be just for you. So go ahead and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Send it to a friend, a spouse, a sister in Christ, somebody who's been feeling stuck or silent in this area. Let's spread healing, freedom, and truth one conversation at a time. And until next time, we're going to get candid, but keep it God. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.